Welcome back to Viewpoints, listeners. I'm your host, Henry Grossi. It'd be a great pleasure to welcome a guest who hasn't been on Viewpoints before. It's an interesting one. The area, Mark Pelley, who's the snake hunter, snake catcher, snake handler. He comes from around the King Lake area of Victoria, and I had the pleasure of seeing Mark in action at a birthday party on the weekend for some young children. It was a fascinating learning experience, and he certainly got the skills to engage young children in a safe and friendly way. Welcome to Viewpoints, Mark Pelley.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm very well, Mark. Today, how's today going with the snakes?
Less snakes around in this weather, but they are still out and about, so you do need to keep your wits about you still, even though it's getting colder.
Watch out for them. Now, before we go into the work you do, Mark, I'm fascinated to know how you became, firstly, I guess, interested in being a snake hunter, and how you got into the occupation.
Certainly. Well, my story is not something that I recommend for anyone. I grew up in Diamond Creek, which is the northeastern suburbs of Melbourne. And as a child growing up, before all the housing development occurred, I used to walk around on the weekends and just go exploring. I couldn't help notice that I'd see occasionally blue-tongued lizards and snakes crawling around. Not knowing any better, I used to pick them up as a young child because I was fascinated by them.
Snakes included?
Yes. Many years later, in about 2012, I found myself in a position where I suddenly became a single father. I have 5 daughters, and I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? I can't work in my old job. I thought, what a better opportunity in life to make my passion my profession. So I gave up what I used to do and began to catch venomous snakes and teach about venomous snakes for a living. And that's basically a shortened version of how I became the snake hunter.
Now, the first thing that crops in most people's minds is venomous snakes. That's dangerous. How accurate is that assumption?
That's actually very accurate. Australia has the most venomous snakes in the world. We have more venomous snakes than non-venomous snakes, so we're the only country to achieve that. And of the top 10 most deadly snakes in the world, 5 are from Australia. Of the top 5 most venomous snakes in the world, 4 are from Australia. In Melbourne, you'll find the eastern tiger snake, which is the 5th most venomous snake in the world, and the eastern brown snake, which is the 2nd. If either of these snakes bite you, you've got about half an hour before, if a snake bites you, one of these snakes bites you and envenomation occurs, you have about half an hour before you could actually die. And that shows you how dangerous they are.
Now, people sometimes get bitten by snakes, and I guess in the heat of the moment, do you always know what sort of snake you're bitten by? I guess is a good starting point, isn't it?
That's a really good question. A lot of people used to believe that if you get bitten by a snake, you need to capture it so that way you can identify it and get the correct antivenom. In fact, today the opposite is true. If a snake bites you, just back away. You do not need to know what type of snake bit you. Make sure you apply the proper first aid, call 000, and get to hospital as soon as you can. Once in hospital, provided that you do the proper first aid, they can test the bite site to determine what type of snake bit you so they can administer the appropriate antivenom. However, if for some reason they cannot identify this, they do have a polyvalent antivenin. So it's a type of multi-antivenom, if you will, that can deal with different types of snakes. The short answer to your question is you do not need to know what type of snake bit you.
But of course the idea is not to get bitten in the first. Now, when you say first aid, I mean, when I was young, and that's a long time ago now, Mark, we were told things like apply tourniquets, don't go running if you can help it, you keep as calm and cool and as immobile as possible. There even was, before my time, people used to, some people would try to suck the venom out, all these sorts of things. What is the most modern method of first aid immediately after you're bitten?
Really great question. The Royal Flying Doctor Service, the Australian Venom Research Unit, the Department of Health have come up with the most recent guidelines for the treatment of snake bites, which is very different to what we used to know. If you're bitten by a snake, and almost all bites occur either on the hand or on the feet and ankles, so the extremities of the limb, you are to apply a firm pressure bandage up the entire limb. When I say firm, it means you do not cut off the blood supply, but nice and firm so that way it's tight. And the technique is called the pressure immobilization technique. So the name gives away what you need to do. Pressure bandage across the entire limb, immobilize the limb. Sometimes that means applying a splint or just laying very still. Call in 000 and don't move. If you move, it can spread the venom faster. Now, that half hour I gave you earlier, if you get bitten by one of these snakes, can now be extended, provided you apply the bandage properly. That can be extended to a good 4 to 6 hours before death can result. So that way you get plenty of time to get to hospital, get the proper treatment, if you apply the proper first aid as I described.
Now, what if you don't walk around with a pressure bandage? I mean, and I guess one experience would be you're walking around and you get bitten by a snake. People, first thing is you go into shock, I'd say. People around you have to be calm. There isn't a pressure bandage as such. What can you use as an alternative?
It's a brilliant question. What do you do? Because not everybody thinks I'm going to carry a pressure bandage around with me in the event of a snake bite. Use a cotton T-shirt, a pillowcase or some type of loose material, and try to tightly, without cutting off the blood supply, wrap around the area. That said, I still recommend everyone to go out. They only cost about $10 just to get at least one pressure bandage for the home. You never know when you're going to need it, and it's better to have it and never acquire it than need it and not have it.
Now, there's a common perception, Mark, around the traps that, look, I'm in a suburban block. Yeah, we hear about snakes from time to time, but they're not really around. I'm not likely to get bitten in my backyard or my kids. That's not necessarily true, is it?
It's actually the opposite that is true. There are more snakes in the suburbs than there are out in the country. In suburban areas, there's plenty of food, water, and shelter opportunities for snakes. They can live in much more dense populations than they do actually out in the wild. Now, almost all of the snakes that I capture are in people's homes and backyards. And also the Australian Venom Research Unit in 2017 did a study, who gets bitten by snakes? And they found the most common people bitten by snakes were men over the age of 40, after 4 p.m. in and around their own home. So there are actually more snakes around the home than there are out in the wild, and you're more likely to be bitten by a snake in and around your own home. So if you think that you're safe in the suburbs, actually that's not true.
The only good news you had in that little illustration, Mark, for my producer here, is he was almost in a state of immobilised shock as you went through all of that. When you said over 40, he suddenly felt he got some good news, because you were ticking all the boxes for him being a prime candidate to be bitten by a snake.
Sure.
What about children?
Children do get bitten by snakes. The statistic I gave you before was about the people most commonly bitten by snakes. A few years ago, there was a prime example. A few years ago, there was a small child, and this was published in the media. His name was Eli Campbell in Queensland. He was collecting eggs. Young boy, I think he was about 2 or 3. Young boy collecting eggs with his mother. His mum turned around for a split second, and she heard, ow, ow, ow. Turned back, and a coastal taipan had bitten him 3 times.
Gee.
Within about 10 minutes, I don't know how the paramedics got there so fast, but they do an amazing job. They got there very quickly. Within about 10 to 15 minutes, he was already pronounced. They managed to revive him back to life, and many hundreds of hours of rehabilitation later, he walked out of hospital, albeit with some type of brain damage, visual impairment, and he will require some form of care for the rest of his life. So kids can get bitten, and the problem with children being bitten is that because their bodies are so small and their metabolisms are so fast, the venom can affect them much, much, much quicker than it can in a full-grown adult. A lot of the places that I catch snakes are actually in kindergartens, creches, children's schools, and also, like I said, in backyards as well. So one thing I strongly recommend for any parent listening is to educate your children to stay away from snakes.
I was very impressed with what you said at the party, because it was an information educational session as much as it was interesting and entertaining. How to avoid being bitten by a snake. There are strategies we can use, aren't there, Mark? You might like to illustrate them.
Definitely. Now, it was actually asked. Last year, 2017, there were over about 116 people. I can't remember the exact number, but about over 100 people who were bitten by snakes Australia-wide. They all asked, what were you doing just before the snake bit you? And everyone had one of two answers. They were either trying to capture the snake or they were trying to kill it. In other words, if you leave a venomous snake alone, it will leave you alone. And something that you saw me teaching all the children was, if you see a snake, step back from the snake, call an adult. This is a child. You call an adult and make sure you keep an eye on the snake from a very safe distance while you're calling your local snake catcher to attend and safely remove the animal.
It's contrary to popular belief, and I think I didn't know this fact about snakes. Australian snakes, unlike some overseas, they won't chase after you.
Yes, this is correct. Now, I've been catching snakes for a very long time now, and I've been dealing with them for a lot of my life. Every time anyone sees a video or photos of me capturing snakes, it's not the snake chasing me, it's me chasing the snake. And it's not because I have some kind of special power or skill that the snakes ran away from me. In fact, they're very shy creatures. They're just as shy as they are deadly. So if you see a snake and back away from it, it's not going to want to chase you. It may bluff, it may hiss, it may make a mock strike towards you, it may even make a strike towards you. But essentially, it's just trying to defend itself so it can get away from you.
So when they hear you coming along, generally snakes will try to get away once they feel vibrations or hear sounds like that.
In fact, you bring up another interesting myth about snakes as well, just in that question.
Yep.
A lot of people think if you make a lot of noise and vibrations in the ground, the snakes can actually hear you and will feel you and then run away. The primary sense organs on a snake are actually its eyes and its tongue, so they see and they smell. And that's how they generally and predominantly perceive the world. In addition, some snakes, or all those in Melbourne at least, have got heat sensors as well, so they can actually, sense heat. So what happens is a snake is hiding in, for example, a bush or somewhere in your backyard. They can see you, they can smell that you're around, and they're just waiting for you to finish what you're doing, move along so they can do so as well.
Interesting, I didn't know that. Mark, we're going to take a short break. Can you hold the line? Welcome back to Viewpoints, listeners. I'm your host, Henry Grossick. We're having a fascinating discussion with Mark Pelley, who's a snake hunter, snake catcher in Melbourne. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, before we were talking about how we can, understand a little bit more about snakes and how to avoid being bitten, and if we are, what to do. I was fascinated on your website, The Snake Hunter, teach dogs to avoid snakes. That's a lot of people wouldn't know you could do that. Tell us about it.
It's something that I have a lot of passion for working in this field of teaching dogs to avoid snakes. Working as a snake catcher over the past couple of years, I found that more than 50%, so more than half the time that I went out to catch a snake, was because there was a dog that actually knew there was a snake in the backyard or in the home. And every single week, especially over spring and summer, I have to spend a lot of my time consoling dog owners who have had their dog bitten and killed by a snake. A dog is your best friend. It's your friend for its whole life and is loyal and dedicated to you. To different degrees of, behaviour and whether or not they're naughty or not, but they still love you. And we love our dogs too.
Yes.
And I thought there's something that's got to be done about this. So I put a lot of effort and research, and I actually met a man in Perth called Seth Pywell who actually invented teaching dogs to avoid snakes. And what he does is he actually now trains trainers to do this. I learned everything that I could from him, came back to Melbourne with this knowledge, and now I actually teach dogs to avoid snakes. And it's very fascinating and very interesting because we teach dogs that if they see a snake, to stay away, and if they smell a snake, to stay away.
So people, which leads us into the next thing, and that is there are many things you do, and entertaining is only one of them. Tell us the range of services that you provide, because I know we're getting into winter, but at the same time, it's valuable for us to know, particularly down at the core part of Casey Radio, which is the city of Casey down in Cranbourne. Lots of suburban blocks and lots of swamps and forests down there too. So I'm sure there's snakes everywhere down here.
Definitely there are. So what I do is predominantly spring and summer, but all year round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I'm a venomous snake catcher. So I catch snakes that go into people's backyards and homes. as discussed, I also teach dogs to avoid snakes. How you met me is I actually do reptile shows and parties for kids. I can bring everything from lizards, frogs, dragons, turtles, pythons to kids' birthday parties and teach them about snakes. And the other thing that I do, and that I'm used a lot for, is I actually work as a consultant and run snake safety and snake awareness workshops. For example, I've worked with the CFA, Victoria Police, private industries, individuals, and I teach them how to be safe around Australia's venomous snakes. So that way we can live safely and the snakes can be safe from us as well.
Do you go to schools very often? Because I could see a market there for what you do.
Definitely. So I frequently appear in different schools, and with appropriate to the age of the children, I teach about keeping away from snakes. So you could be in kindergarten where I keep it very simple, or you could be in year 12 where I talk about how to keep safe from snakes and also talk about ecology of snakes, understanding their behavior, understanding their patterns, why they do what they do, the food web. I explain all these things. So I go into a lot of schools, high schools, primary schools, kindergartens, creches, private schools, as well as private educational groups to talk about how to keep safe from snakes and understanding this fascinating creature that occurs a lot more frequently than you realise in Australia.
I mean, later on we'll have to talk about coming out to Berwick Lodge Primary School. We're a big school down here in Berwick, and I'm sure it'd be of great value to the teachers as well as to the kids, Mark. But moving on, and it's a question that has to be asked. Have you ever been bitten by a snake? How many times have you been asked that question?
Actually, every time I go to catch a snake, people ask me, how many times have you been bitten? Yeah. So far, despite I was very lucky as a child, so far, 0. I've never been bitten by a venomous snake yet. And the evidence is the fact that I'm still standing and still operating. Absolutely. Because even if you survive a snake bite, if it envenomates you, it can have serious long-term effects on your organs, which can impair your quality of life. So no snake bites yet, and hopefully it stays that way for a long, long time to come.
So obviously and we don't want to encourage amateurs to be jumping out there, but in a general sense, what are the key strategies you use not to be bitten by a venomous snake, apart from not getting in their faces when you're not trying to catch them?
It's a really great question. Yeah, I ask myself this all the time. How did I manage to survive that one? You learn from experience, I guess. But what I would say is I really respect and understand that the snake is not actually aggressive. It's just frightened. So I often position myself in such a way where the snake thinks it can get away, then I can pick it up by the tail. Or alternatively, depending on the scenario, I try to make sure the snake understands that I'm not there to hurt it. I'm trying to help it. This doesn't always work. Sometimes I capture a snake and it's quite bitey, or it's certainly demonstrating to me its very venomous fangs. But I maintain calmness, and it also really, really helps me that I've got fast reflexes as well.
It certainly does. Now, the show that you presented, you didn't wrap venomous snakes around the kids. And there's the non-venomous ones. You might talk about them a little bit because they're part of your show, aren't they?
Correct. So I have a lot of Australian pythons as part of my show: Central Australian pythons, olive pythons, black-headed pythons, and you saw all these on the day. And these pythons are really great, and they're an excellent way to demonstrate to children, parents, adults, anyone present, they're an excellent way to demonstrate that if you treat a snake very gently, it doesn't want to go out of its way to bite you. So we have pythons crawling on children. I think you saw one there that was about 3 meters long, the big olive python, and many people could hold that at the same time. This snake is enormous, yet it doesn't want to hurt anyone because I teach everyone to be nice and gentle to the snake. So it's a really fun and amazing experience just to be holding this big, powerful creature that's a gentle giant.
Amazing. Now, one last thing, time's on the wing before we sum up. Snake proofing. You say that you're often asked about how to snake proof a home. I mean, obviously there are limitations to that, but what's your advice to minimise the risk? My producer's here, all ears on this one.
Look, there's some general recommendations, but then I'll give you the harsh truth. So the general recommendations are: it never hurts to have a very neat and tidy backyard. So if your backyard is covered with hard rubbish, overgrown foliage, weeds everywhere, long grass, this invites a snake to be hiding there. If you've got a very neat and tidy garden, you cleaned up, there's no vermin around, etc. This does not actually stop a snake from coming in. What it does is it allows you to see snakes. You cannot effectively 100% snake-proof a home. I have found snakes in all kinds of homes, in all kinds of conditions. I've found them in schools, hospitals, childcare centres, apartment blocks, parks, you name it. I found snakes. Mechanical workshops, inside cars. Snakes will show up where they want to show up, when they want to show up there, and there's nothing that can be done. The whole strategy behind having the place clean, neat, tidy, so everything is visible, is so that when a snake is there, you can see it and identify it early rather than being caught up by a snake. And when I tell this to people, they get very thoroughly disappointed.
Oh, I can just see my producer's wincing. He thought you had a magic cure for just his property.
If I did, I'd sell that magic cure and I'd be a millionaire.
You would. What about if you had a few pet kookaburras?
That'd be very helpful to actually have some pet kookaburras around. I strongly encourage having native wildlife, roaming freely in people's backyards and in their trees.
Yes.
They do help get rid of the baby snakes, but like I said, there's nothing you can do to stop snakes from going into the backyard if they want to.
Now the different snakes. I mean, obviously they're not advanced animals in some ways, but they must. Different snakes. Personality is not the right word, but they're different in their behaviours, aren't they?
Oh, definitely, very, very true. Snakes, generally, they're all very, very shy. Snakes generally will want to avoid conflict. Snakes generally, they want to eat, they want to drink water, they want to mate, and they want to hide. This is their general behaviour. That said, I found most snakes I've come across are quite friendly when you treat them very well, and every now and then you come across a snake that's either had a hard life or it's just in a bad mood because no matter how well you treat it, it's just not treating you nicely back. So
there's humans like that too.
Exactly. I think every creature could be like that.
Good. Now, look, there's so many options for people to get in touch with you for whatever reason. How would they do that, Mark?
If you've got a few options to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, which is snakehunter.com.au. You can look me up on Facebook or social media if you type in The Snake Hunter, or you can give me a call and ask me any question you like on 0403 875 409.
And it wouldn't be a bad idea. I've just made a little mental note for us to, at our school, and we'll do this, is to have, like we do for emergency numbers, have your phone number handy in a place where for quick, easy reference.
Absolutely. It's a great idea because the time that you want to put down the snake hunter's number in your phone is not when you see a snake, it's well beforehand, so you know what to look up when you do see a snake.
Robert's already got it down in triplicate. He's particularly twitchy about snakes, is Robert. Mark, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you on Viewpoints, and we'll chat off air sometime about coming out to Berwick Lodge, a big school down here in the southeast. We'd love to have you down here, and we're very much into filmmaking and film production, high quality stuff there, so there might be some opportunities there to take some film work of what you're doing, because it's an amazing thing.
I'd very much be interested in that. Let me know when you're ready. But for today, thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, thank you. It's not only been a pleasure having you on, it's been very, very helpful. Listeners, that was fascinating, wasn't it? Mark Pelley, Snake Hunter, 0403 875 409. Just Google Snake Hunter and you'll find him, and there's so many reasons why it's a good idea to have his details handy. We'll take a short break. Don't go away.